Did you see a Facebook ad today about a new project in a city that you've been wanting to invest in? Or perhaps you saw a post online or a video on YouTube about it. Before you transfer that reservation fee, here is the list of what you should consider before locking that unit in. In today's video, I will be taking you through the reservation process checklist, 4 things you need to know before you reserve. The first thing you should consider is who is the developer of this project. What is their track record? A great project plan doesn't mean it's going to be a great project. You need to consider who the developer is and if they can actually deliver. You also need to set your expectations. Real estate is not an easy business to be in. Most of the time, developers outsource the construction to contractors, and that's why the turnover units are often not as perfect as you would like it to be compared to if you built it yourself. So again, check who the developer is, how many projects they've turned over, and what is the feedback of their buyers, and how good their after-sales service is. I'm not saying you should not invest in new developers at all. All these seasoned developers all started with project number 1. However, there are drawbacks to investing in a developer that is still building their first project. For instance, there's this new developer in Cagayan de Oro. A client of mine had questions regarding their contract to sell and turnover unit, and they took such a long time, like more than a month, to answer her questions because they had to forward her questions to upper management since their staff couldn't answer her questions. Also, my client asked for a deed of restrictions since she wanted to renovate her unit, but they told her that their DOR was not final yet. They did actually give her a deed of restrictions, but she still couldn't start the design phase since the developer said they were still going to revise it. So these were the drawbacks that our team experienced in dealing with a new developer. New developers often lack experience, which can make them unfamiliar with best practices and project management. They may also lack the resources that bigger developers will already have. Another challenge for new developers is bank accreditation. Banks are very strict with project accreditation, especially if this is the developer's first project. Banks can take years to accredit the project of a new developer because of their rigorous screening process. So bank accreditation is vital because when you buy a house and lot or a condo unit that is developer owned, that is pre-selling, you will need to apply for a home loan once your equity is fully paid. Now, the bank and the developer will have an agreement called a deed of undertaking or DOU. This means that the bank is okay to release the loan amount to the developer even if the title has not yet been transferred to the borrower's name. But without a DOU, the title will still need to be transferred to the borrower's name first before the loan can be released. So usually it is the developer who does the transfer, and it takes them usually 6 to 12 months to do so. Some can even take longer. So the effect for the buyer is that your unit won't be turned over to you until the title is transferred. This means you will not be able to use your unit until then. The second thing you need to consider is the mortgage payment of your unit after equity period. When you invest in a pre-selling property, the down payment is usually between 10 to 20% of the total contract price, payable in a span of between 12 to 50 months depending on the developer. Let's say you bought a condo unit priced at 4 million, so total contract price 4.2 million, transfer charges 200,000. The down payment at 10% would be about 400,000 pesos. Divide that over a span of 36 months, that would amount to 11,000 per month for the next 36 months, your equity period. And then the 90% can be loaned at the bank. So that's about 3.6 million. That would be at 34,000 per month for 15 years at 8% per annum interest rate. So as you can see, the equity is very affordable, only at 11,000 per month. So some buyers might think that this is all they need to pay for. And that is incorrect, because after you have fully paid for your equity, you will then need to get a loan on the balance. And the monthly amortization for that will be usually a lot higher than your equity. Of course, your monthly amortization will depend on your loanable amount. and your loan term, and also the prevailing interest rate. So for this computation, I used 8% because the interest rates right now are between 8 to 8.5% per annum. It may go higher or lower depending on the market. You may also request for a longer loan term, say 20 years or more, and this can also lower your monthly amortization. Real estate is a long-term investment, so you need to think long-term. Will I be able to afford the monthly amortization after my equity payment? So your income will need to be at least 110,000 per month to be eligible to get a loan of 3.6 million. This brings us to the third thing you need to consider, home loan eligibility. Will I be approved for a home loan? What are the things that banks will consider? So there are 3 factors that will determine how much you can loan: gross income, age, marital status, and the property that you will be using as collateral. Your monthly amortization must not be more than 1/3 of your gross income. So I just use a mortgage calculator to compute for my clients what their maximum loan amount is. So if you want me to compute what your maximum loanable amount is, just contact me. My contact info is in the description box, and I can compute for you what your maximum loanable amount is. The higher your gross income, the higher your loan amount can be. I actually have another video where I go through the entire home loan process, so you can check it out here. I'll also leave a link in the description box. Now let's go to the next consideration, which is age. Bank age of maturity is 65 years old. So your age will also determine your loan term. Most banks give a maximum loan term of 20 years. Maybank is one of the banks that I know that gives a loan term of 30 years. Also BPI for their new program. So if you are, let's say, 50 years old now, that means 65 minus 50 equals 15. So this means you can have a loan term of up to 15 years. And then the next thing banks will consider is marital status. If you're single, then no problem, as you can sign all the documents yourself. If you're happily married, then no problem as well, because both of you probably reached a mutual decision to buy the property. The problem arises if the buyer is separated but not annulled, because technically and legally you are still married, especially if they haven't been in contact with their ex-husband or wife for years. So this is a challenge because if you buy a property through bank financing, both spouses will need to sign the loan documents. So the option here is to buy in either cash or deferred cash, because you can then sign all the documents yourself, because you wouldn't need to get a home loan. But just bear in mind that if you do decide to sell the property, then being married, your spouse will still need to sign the deed of sale as well. The fourth thing you need to consider is developer's assumption process. Every developer has a different policy and process on assumption. And this is important because we don't know what will happen in the future. If during the equity stage you decide to sell your property, then you need to know in advance what the process is so you won't be blindsided. First, let's define deed of sale by assumption. What does this mean? For sale by assumption means a property is being sold with the existing mortgage or loan still in place, and then the buyer assumes the responsibility of making the mortgage payments moving forward. Or the property can still be at equity stage, meaning the buyer is still paying the developer the down payment. So if you do decide to sell during this stage, the buyer can pay back the seller the equity that he or she paid plus interest, or the profit of the seller. And the buyer can then be the one to apply for a loan on the unit. Some developers like Sibulan Masters have a policy wherein if you decide to sell your unit within equity stage, you need to fully pay the unit before it can be assigned to the new buyer. So for example, you bought a 10 million house with CLI, total contract price is 10 million. The assumption price, for instance, let's say it's at 1 million. Payment made to Sibulan Masters is 500,000. Balance with CLI is 300,000. Now let's check out the buyer's total investment. So assumption price is at 1 million, redocumentation fee 100,000, reservation fee Actually, it will depend on the project and the unit, but let's say it's 20,000. Let's say there's a notarial fee of 50,000. You add all that up, it will amount to a total investment of 1.1 million 70. So the buyer will need to shell out 1.17 million. The seller pays their balance at Sibulan Masters, and then the buyer needs to submit all their requirements before the unit is assigned to him or her. So part of CLI's policy is that the new buyer needs to pay 100,000 redocumentation fee and also pay again the reservation fee. The reservation fee will depend on the project, but usually the range is between 20 to 50,000 per unit. Most developers have a similar assumption process, although the redocumentation fee can vary. However, there are also some developers that discourage assumption. So with WeCom, for example, the unit can be assumed by the buyer's first degree relative only, like parents or siblings. So in this case, the buyer only has to pay a 50,000 peso transfer charge, and the buyer and seller can agree on internally as to what the assumption price will be. If it's not a first degree relative, then WeCom will be the one to set the assumption price, because as per their policy, assumption price shall be based on whatever is their prevailing rate for the unit. So the buyer will pay the price difference plus 50,000 peso transfer charge. So for example, the seller bought the unit at 5.7 million. Seller already paid 700,000 in down payment to WeCom, and then there's a loanable amount of 5 million. Now let's say WeCom's prevailing rate for this unit is already at 6 million. So there's a price difference of 300,000. So in this case, the 300,000 peso price difference will be payable to WeCom plus the 50,000 peso transfer charge. So as per WeCom, the purpose of this policy is to discourage assumptions and to also protect the integrity of their pricing. Although frankly, they are the only developer with this kind of policy. Most developers only have a transfer charge, and it's up to the seller to set the assumption price. But with WeCom's case, they're basically absorbing the profit of the seller. So the disadvantage I see here is that as an investor of WeCom, you will have a hard time having your unit assumed during equity period because of this policy. So it would be better to wait for loan takeout so that you can have it assumed at your price. Now here is a bonus for OFWs. I'm going to add a fifth that you need to consider if you are an OFW, and that is, do you have a representative or attorney in fact? For those who are based abroad, you will need someone to transact on your behalf. So this person will sign the contracts for you and will also issue post-dated checks on your behalf. You also have the option to do auto-debit for your equity payments if you have a BDO or BPI account, but only if that project is an Ayala or SMDC project. So again, the four things that you need to consider before reserving are: who is the developer of this project? What is their track record? You have to check this. Second is the mortgage payment of your unit after equity period. Will you be able to afford the monthly amortization after equity period long term? And third, home loan eligibility. Will you be approved by the bank? So you have to check your age, your income, marital status, as those are the things that the bank will consider. And fourth, developer assumption process. And of course, fifth bonus for OFWs, do you have a representative in the Philippines? Because you will need someone to transact on your behalf. And that's it for today's vlog. If you have more questions, send me a message. My contact info is in the description box. And if you want my free ebook on my buyer's guide for buying property in the Philippines, send me an email so I can send you a copy.